The Adventures of Port Jervis.
For anyone who knows where I am, yes, I am not in Port Jervis, and I'm doing the intro bit at Moynihan Hall. Because I had so much fun in Port Jervis, I completely forgot to make the intro there. Anyways, roll the introduction. Oh, hello there. I didn't see you. Good morning. Just give me a second. I'm gonna go freshen up and I'll be right back, okay? Alright. Wait, how did you get into my house?
It is about close to 6:30 a.m. I am boarding on the Northeast Regional train, going from South Station to New York Penn Station, because we're gonna, well, when I say we, I mean me and my friend Jared here. We are traveling on an adventure to Port Jervis, specifically to the Historic Transportation Center, as this weekend is the grand opening weekend for this center. It is bright and early. Jared and I are going to be taking an Amtrak train down to New York. We're going to be chilling a day in the city, and then the next day we're going to go to Port Jervis and have our last day do something. I don't know. To be determined. Yeah, we have some things planned and some things are just whatever. But anyway, we are now boarding our train. It's very active here. Yeah, we'll see you guys on board.
The train in question that we were taking was the Northeast Regional. As I said, we would embark from South Station in Boston and head to... wait, hold on.
So, our train was supposed to leave at 6:35. They're leaving. It's 6:47. Earlier, they said they had some sort of problem, and then they boarded us on the train. It seems like they still have problems, but I'm wicked tired because I had like no sleep last night. But whatever, I'm gonna throw some B-roll here because I'm gonna sleep. Off to you, B-roll and narration, Max.
Okay, well, as I was saying...
So after being on this train for almost an hour with mechanical problems, we're changing trains. We are still at South Station.
Moving to another track.
Right. There's our original train. Here's our new train. This ain't no one up front, so looks like we might get the front part to ourselves. Right after you, good sir. We're finally leaving.
We're off.
We're going.
He can't believe it either.
Yeah. All right, Boston. See ya on Monday. New York City. Here we go.
Okay, this time we actually left. Jared and I embarked from Boston almost an hour after our original departure time to make our way into New York. The Northeast Regional is a major intercity rail service in the US, making stops between key cities along the Northeast Corridor running from Boston and all the way down to Virginia. Like any train, the Northeast Regional competes with road users and airplanes. After all, Interstate 95 runs practically parallel to the railroad and airplanes have speed to their advantage. However, the Northeast Regional does have its advantages, like avoiding traffic experienced on I-95, and it's far less of a hassle to board and disembark a train from origin to destination, unlike when it comes to traveling on a plane. Above all else, it's very comfortable. As someone who has used different modes of transit for long distances, a train will always be superior in this regard, no matter what sort of seating one will obtain. And lucky for us, we were able to get a great amount of space for our legs. Alas, we arrived at Penn Station in New York City to meet with Jared's friend Antanas and made our way to the hotel we were staying at, conveniently located only a few blocks from Penn.
Oh my god, we are on a Strode bin. Strode view.
Are we?
No. We're on a Strode.
Got the Strode view.
No.
Our mission is to
All that
reduce all the Strode.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
At least we got bus lanes.
After admiring our interesting view, we made our way to the subway while walking in the middle of a downpour, which quickly changed to a shower. We took the subway to one of our planned destinations located in downtown Brooklyn. Once we arrived, I fed Jared with a bag of pretzels before having to enter our stop, the New York Transit Museum. While waiting to get some equipment ready, Antanas was having fun with the bag of pretzels I gave to Jared earlier. Not wanting to get in trouble over a bag of pretzels, we made our way into the museum. The upper level showcased some of the history of what it took to create and operate the New York subway system, with various photographs as well as displays of tools and equipment. Not only was there information about the subway, but there were other displays for other modes of transit which had or continued to operate in the city. Arguably, the main attraction I sought out was on the lower level, and it was for a very good reason. The museum is home to some of New York City's former subway cars and equipment, which have been carefully preserved to where they are still operational. The museum itself was actually a former subway station called Court Street, which was a part of the New York City's independent subway system, now part of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, or MTA. Court Street was part of a shuttle service to connect with Hoyt-Schermerhorn Street Station, as Hoyt-Schermerhorn was a stop for other subway lines. The station and shuttle opened in 1936, only to be abandoned 10 years later for the lack of popularity, mainly with how close Court Street was in proximity with other stations. While not used for train service after abandonment, it had other purposes, including being a film set. On July 4th, 1976, Court Street was used as a temporary museum to display exhibits of New York City's transportation history as part of the United States bicentennial celebration. But because the museum garnered so much popularity, it ended up becoming a permanent museum. Not all the subway cars are located within the museum, let alone other equipment such as buses. However, Court Street is connected with the New York subway system, and therefore the museum can move the vehicles for excursions and for other purposes. Once I came to appreciate the relics that once thundered throughout the big city, I joined with Jared and Antanas to see what they were up to.
But now, oh, got it. They found it. Although, I must say, you pull here, but it makes it, tips it up. Just push it up.
Jesus
I don't think so. No, you do. Yeah, you have to pull it. You have 3 hands. 3 hands. One for this, 2 for that.
Yeah. Oh. This device I like to call the mother's finger punishment device. Hey! Hey! Cut that out.
We need some ventilation.
Clear prop!
This is like the squab. This is like for the clicks. Like one click.
Yeah, exactly.
I can death stare the engineer.
No, that's a confession, like confession engineer. I'm here to confess. Tell me your sins, child.
Forgive me, motorman, for I have sinned. I used the emergency exit.
What are you doing?
Sit down, Jared.
I wanted to see if we did anything.
Stop touching it. Don't touch anything, Jared. You're banned from touching stuff.
Once the two of them had their fair share of exploring, it was time for us to get lunch at a very fine establishment.
Well, that was a delightful lunch and a nice trip to the museum to, get a perspective of what transportation was in New York City. But, being far away from home, I do feel a little homesick, so I'm just wondering if there might be a little bit of Boston in New York City. Actually, there is. Let's go.
While Boston and New York are almost worlds apart in every aspect of life, with one having the best baseball team in the world and the other having the New York Yankees, there is a piece of the city on the hill in the Big Apple.
So we are in the Red Hook, I want to call it district, maybe neighborhood, the Red Hook neighborhood, where there is a special little vehicle that we're all going to witness that I found through the power of Google. So follow me, boys.
Through a street with old warehouses and Staten Island peeking ahead, there was something waiting for us around the corner.
We got some tracks, we got some butts, and we got PCC number 3303.
PCC number 3303 was once a part of the MBTA's Green Line as well as the T's ancestors, Boston's MTA. And if you are wondering why a Boston trolley is in New York in the first place, well, it's a story which had a sense of optimism, but ended up only being a dream. In 1979, a man named Bob Diamond had rediscovered a train tunnel running under Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, which was built in 1844, allegedly being the world's first subway. With the finding, Bob formed the Brooklyn Historic Railway Association, or BHRA, to restore this tunnel and make it into a historical landmark. In the 90s, the BHRA began to plan and construct the trolley service in Red Hook and obtained 16 trolleys. All but one were Presidential Conference Committee cars, or PCC, including 3303. A short loop was in place and, from what I could gather, was functional. But the long-term goal for the organization was to have streetcars run as public transit services once again in the city, starting with the line running from Red Hook and into downtown Brooklyn. The dream was kept alive for a long time with some support from the New York City Department of Transportation. However, with a study conducted by the DOT, they found it infeasible and wouldn't fund the line the BHRA had proposed. In 2004, the majority of the loop was paved over. Whatever track was left continued to carry 3 of the PCC cars. 2 of the cars eventually ended up going to museums, with 3303 remaining in Brooklyn. Could trolleys once again run through the streets of New York? Maybe so long as 3303 remains, there might still be hope.
How long is the walk, Chief?
10 minutes.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. We move from a sad, I guess, I don't know, depressing thing to a more cheerful thing. To a ferry!
The journey must go on, so we embarked for our next destination, Staten Island. Before that, we made a detour to find some needed electronics, so we headed to Smith 9th Street Station, a very tall station to say the least. I wonder how I was doing there.
This is worse than Porter. Jesus.
After nearly collapsing due to being unfit, we took a train into downtown Brooklyn and made our way to the Atlantic Terminal Mall, only to find nothing we needed. Instead, we had to go back to where we were before, close to Red Hook, to a Micro Center. Once arriving at Micro Center, we were a bit sidetracked.
So going to Micro Center, getting a cable to charge my phone. Jared got an SD card. We discovered the world's largest keyboard that you can have on a desk. We're gonna look at some train schedules.
Once we got bored of the keyboard, we headed to the Whitehall Ferry Terminal for the Staten Island Ferry. The service is quite remarkable, running 24/7 on a 30-minute frequency most of the time and every 15 minutes during rush hour. The ride is also free for anyone to use, whether you are a commuter or a traveler. To top it all, you get some incredible views that can only be described by this footage. Once we made it to Staten Island, we headed over to the platform for the Staten Island Railway.
Being that I have such little energy, and with all the shaking I've had today, I'm just like, I'm ready to crash at any point now. But we're not done yet. We gotta ride Staten Island Railway.
While I was interrupted by what sounded like the operator braking the train, we set off to make our way along the railway. While the ride itself was quite nice, the train was rocking back and forth so much I could barely stabilize my camera and nearly crashed my head through the window. We were planning to ride all the way to the end of the line and back to the ferry, but our stomachs said otherwise and we decided it would be best to grab dinner instead. After all, pretzels and burgers weren't enough to satisfy our hunger for trains, if that makes any sense. So we hopped off at Dungan Hills and made our way to get some delicious shawarma and other Mediterranean delicacy. We were all so hungry that I didn't take the time to film what we got. But at the end of the day, this is all about transit and travels, not necessarily food. Well, I mean, I still want food. I have my standards.
Alright, finished our food. Pretty decent food.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yep. And now we're gonna catch a bus that's gonna run through the rest of Staten Island, going to Brooklyn, and then we're gonna finish off in Manhattan, where we're gonna get off at 34th, West 34th, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, walk past Penn Station to get to the hotel. So, catch you on the bus in a second. I am exhausted, to say the least. We made it back to the hotel. It is 11:15 at night. Now we're gonna get some shut-eye because tomorrow is a very important day. Ain't that right? Tomorrow is finally the day we're gonna go to Port Jervis. We're gonna go to the historical center. We're gonna have a lot of fun. Hopefully get enough rest, and so on and so forth. So until then, I'm gonna get some shut-eye, and I will see you then. Good morning. It is close to 9 o'clock. It's actually, what, 9:45?
8:48.
8:48, Jesus Christ. Today is finally the day. We are heading up to Port Jervis. I'm gonna go Penn Station, get some breakfast. I'm gonna take a NJ transit train to Secaucus Junction, and then take a train from there, Port Jervis line, up to Port Jervis. Hello, beautiful man.
I'm the one with the food. You are the ones without food.
After Antonos bragged about his breakfast, Jared and I proceeded to get a delicacy we had banned from our state of Massachusetts because it wasn't a Dunkin' Donuts. We got our food, bought our train tickets, and made our way down to the platform to board our train heading to Secaucus Junction, where we would change trains to travel to Port Jervis.
I just want to get at least one taste. Yeah, I only came for this trip just for the Krispy Kreme.
100%.
Yeah.
Screw the train. Antonos sends me pictures all the time.
I'm sorry, Duncan, but Krispy Kreme has better donuts.
To all my fellow Bostonians and folks in Massachusetts, I don't care if I get crucified for that statement. I regret nothing.
It feels like you're like a scalper. You're just like trying to sell me these tickets. Hey guy, I'll give you.
Hey, I heard you want to go to Port Jervis.
Whilst having fun on the train, we made our way to Secaucus. After our arrival, we attempted to get to the next train by being clueless as to where to go.
That goes up. How do we get down?
Making fun of Jared for taking the stairs.
You're so slow.
Ugh.
So slow.
And the ticket gate not accepting my ticket.
Oh, okay. It wasn't scanning. I did it like 5 times.
We made it onto the next platform for our train to Port Jervis, right as our train had arrived. But the luck Jared and I had with our train coming to New York also presented itself on our train to Port Jervis.
So far, 12 minutes delay.
But at least it was a much shorter time.
Finally leaving.
We are moving.
The Port Jervis line as a whole is extraordinarily unique for many great reasons. For transit enthusiasts, the Port Jervis line is owned by the MTA's Metro North Railroad division. However, the line itself is operated and ticketed by New Jersey Transit. For folks who want to go on a hiking trip without needing to drive, the train service can be of great help. There are many stops along the way that are close to trailheads of hiking trails, especially the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail is the longest hiking trail in the world, spanning from Maine down to Georgia for a whopping 2,200 miles. If you want some more detail about this trail and its significance, Alan Fisher has made a video about it and how he once took the Port Jervis line to actually get to the trail. Check it out if you haven't already.
Finally made it out to Port Jervis with these guys. There's a deer. Okay. It's just vibing. We came for a train, instead we're here for deer.
I'm all for it.
Oh, I guess he doesn't want an apple. This thing's literally following us to the.
We have a pet deer now.
We have a new responsibility.
He's coming back with us on the train.
We've made a new friend here today.
Okay, so to clear up what's going on, yes, this is in fact a deer that is casually hanging around humans. His name is Rudy, named after Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and he is known by the locals in Port Jervis. But we are not here for Rudy or any other living creature. We are here for trains. Trains at the grand opening weekend of the Port Jervis Transportation History Center. The center is filled with retired railroad equipment as well as an operational turntable. At the event, not only were we able to look at all these fascinating pieces of history, but got the opportunity to go inside some of them, like Nickel Plate Road sleeper car, City of Lima. It's not every day you get to sleep on an overnight train, and the City of Lima gives a good sense of what it was like to travel overnight in parts of the United States back in the 1950s. That wasn't the only equipment I got to peek in. There was also an old chassis system caboose to look in, as well as various boxcars filled with all sorts of goodies, one of which stores soapbox derby cars, a vehicle used for racing with children for drivers who rely on gravity to get the cars moving. Another boxcar hosted a little theater inside, as well as displays for some bits of history in Port Jervis, though I will say this car was very hard to find. I can't put my finger as to why that was. Though a handful of these cars and vehicles were available for the public to get up close and personal, there were other pieces that were set away but one could still look from afar. To top it all, there was the Erie Railroad turntable, something you really don't see every day, let alone one that is actually operational here in the US. I don't want to spoil anything else for anyone wanting to visit the historic center, but it was a wonderful experience. The History Center's land is owned by the city of Port Jervis, but the facilities and everything operated and maintained there are done by several nonprofit organizations. The organizations have created a unique establishment compared to, say, a transportation museum or historic landmark, which did leave some questions. Luckily, I was able to get answers from the chairman of the board of the Port Jervis Transportation History Center, Rudy Garbley. Rudy is an author of various railroad books and is part of various organizations, including Operation Toy Train, a group of volunteers who organize a toy drive during the holidays. And yes, Rudy has the same name as Rudy the deer. Who would have thought? So what was the reason for creating the History Center? And also, why was Port Jervis chosen to be the historic center?
It's much less deliberate than it sounds, I guess. We were sitting on our Operation Toy Train, Toys for Tots collection train. It was December of 2019. We had talked to couple people from Port Jervis about doing a collection in Port Jervis that year in 2019. And because of the Metro North commuter schedule and stuff, our train is an extra train, it's a special train, so it has to run between everybody else's stuff and not interfere with the commuter schedule. And we just couldn't get it to work around the Metro North schedule. We couldn't get into the city, do the collection, and get out without messing up a train somewhere, even on the weekend schedule. So we're sitting on this train, just brainstorming ideas, and one of our directors said, hey, what about that little yard there with the turntable? I wonder if we could stop in there and we can get out of the way of Metro North. We can just get there, get off their tracks, do our collection, get back on and leave. At the time, Operation Toy Train was in the middle of a really big growth period. In 2017, we had one boxcar. By the end of 2019, we had 6 or 7 pieces of equipment, and we were looking at acquiring like 13 more and trying to figure out what to do with all of them if we were to get them. So we're like, wonder if we can just kind of store the stuff there all year round. It gives us a base of operation. It gives us a place to work on our equipment. That isn't some random siding somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So it kind of just grew from there. Obviously we use this stuff. Our equipment gets used 2 weeks out of the year. We use it for the beginning of December for Toys for Tots, and that's about it. So the rest of the year, it could sit here and be an exhibit or a display or something for the city. So it's something that's, dual purpose then. In terms of how we arrived at the decision, it was a matter of convenience for Operation Toy Train. But obviously, from a historic perspective, it's a hugely historic site. The city owns it because they know it's a historic site, and that's why they bought it in the first place. It was a site that always had that potential to do something with, and they just didn't have somebody to step forward to do it. So when we came in and said, hey, we can do this. We have the equipment already. We have people with experience to do this. We just need permission to do it. It was a pretty easy sell for the city. And that's sort of how it grew from let's store our trains here to, okay, let's have a 4-way partnership and make this an actual historical center.
That history aspect is important for anyone who doesn't know about Port Jervis's past. In 1848, the New York and Erie Railroad created a service to connect Piermont and Dunkirk, New York, with Port Jervis along the route. The city was seen as a crucial component for the railroad's success, so the company established facilities for operations and maintenance, including a roundhouse to store steam locomotives and a big freight yard. Over time, the railroad had gone through numerous changes, including some bankruptcies, but the company in Port Jervis remained on top for decades to come. By the 1920s, over 2,000 residents in Port Jervis were employees in the railroad, and 20 passenger trains stopped in the city every single day. But history doesn't seem to be the only thing that makes up the History Center. As I mentioned, I found a boxcar with soapbox derby cars, which I don't think anyone would normally see, not to mention how other rail cars are being used. Why would those be a part of the establishment anyways?
My job has been really to find things that fit what we want, and it's very much a case by case basis. We bring something into the yard. The Tri-State Museum, there's one car. There's one purpose in that car. It's going to serve that purpose, tell very localized railroad history in that car. We do have a flat car. Flat car is going to be a stage. That's going to serve a purpose of being an event venue for local bands or for performances or any nature, really. We wanted a boxcar to store the soapbox derby stuff in, kind of display it throughout the year. That was the gray car we had on display at our event. So we need a car we can put that in. By everybody working together on it, though, we can serve a lot of different purposes. That's been the one benefit of working with multiple organizations. I don't think any one of us could have taken this on our own and made it successful, because the Dining Car Society is a very one-faceted thing, and it would never be able to use the whole property or the city support or any of the other assets that came into this to its full potential. So as we all work together on this, we can all serve a different function and serve our own little function, and make it a part of a whole thing that's much bigger than any of us could have accomplished on our own. But B, also it helps because we can all focus on our one thing and make that one thing really good.
This is a key component I find distinguishes the History Center to any traditional historic landmark or even a museum. I have never been to a place that reincarnates pieces of history into something almost entirely different from its original purpose. When you go to a museum, it usually displays an item, and all you can do is look at the item and maybe read about what it is and who made it. But the History Center takes it to another level by having each piece literally carry something special to either benefit the city in some way or create some form of experience for a visitor. The city of Lima, as an example, instead of having a sign with information about the wagon, there was a volunteer inside the sleeper car walking visitors through each room and demonstrating what each of the items in that room did. With everything the History Center contains, there was something I wanted to know from Rudy himself. What is your favorite part of the Historic Center?
I think my favorite part of it actually is seeing it happen. Is the actual progress. I was in that yard in 1998 when they were doing the 614 excursions up there with the C&O locomotive. And I remember how that yard looked in 98. I was a little kid, but I remember how it was just overgrown and it was a mess. And they had just put the turntable back in service, and they hadn't really finished weeding the turntable pit out yet. And it was just, okay, open the gates and let people in. It was like, why am I standing here? There's two rails and a turntable and a weed farm. And that's largely what we walked into in December. Kind of a weed and dirt covered piece of property that had a turntable in the middle of it. Seeing what we've been able to accomplish in 6 months, and we've painted 4 rail cars. We've acquired half a dozen rail cars in the past 6 months. We've got 2 locomotives up there running, and the third one's on the way. Exhibits are in. We've got stuff people can see, and it's to go from where we walked into in December, seeing it grow and seeing the public. We haven't had a work day down there. There's not people wandering around asking what's going on and being really interested in it. Just being able to see the progress down there, I think, is my big thing, and my driving force is, every time I go down there, it looks better than it did before I got there. It's becoming a place that I just want to go be.
By 1960, the Erie Railroad merged with the Lackawanna Railroad to form the Erie-Lackawanna Railroad, as both companies, as well as the majority of rail companies across the US, were in decline. The mergers helped to keep the industry briefly afloat, but it wasn't enough. By the 70s, the Erie-Lackawanna was combined with other carriers in the Northeast to form Conrail. Even prior to Conrail's creation, pieces of land and property were sold off, including the iconic Port Jervis station, now known as the Erie Depot. Although the building is filled with various businesses today, it no longer hosts waiting passengers. Many cities and towns across the US were dependent on trains to keep the municipalities alive, including Port Jervis. Since the absence of the Erie in the city, how has Port Jervis prospered?
I moved up to the area end of 2017. So it's been 4.5 years. Even in that time, Port Jervis has really made some big strides. I say really the past decade or so has been its kind of rebirth, because it really got hit hard by the railroad leaving really in the 70s as jobs dwindled and the manufacturing centers dwindled, and the same story that every city in the US faced in the same time period, basically. But there was a point where Port Jervis, the city had about 8,000 something residents, and 2,000 of them worked for the railroad. 2,500 of them work for the railroad. You still have a city of infrastructure to support, even if you have less residents or less jobs or whatever. There's still, the city's still the same size. You still have the same amount of buildings, on the main street and everything else, and you got to find a way to fill them somehow. So if you walked up Front Street, there's probably still a couple of vacant storefronts up there, but 10 years ago, almost all of them were vacant. So it's definitely on the way up and not the way down.
It's great to hear that Port Jervis is doing well after all these years. While I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time in the city, I was able to appreciate some of the beauty it had to offer, including the old brick buildings along Front Street and Jersey Avenue. Although the Erie no longer exists, city residents are able to utilize the Port Jervis line. On top of that, Rudy and the fantastic volunteers have the Port Jervis Transportation History Center to showcase various events, history, and trains for everyone. If someone wants to know more about the history of Port Jervis, where can they find it?
Obviously, you can come to the Port Jervis Transportation History Center, and you can learn about it there at the History Center. I have written a book on the subject, the first of several. It's called The Railroads of Port Jervis, Volume 1. It covers the Erie Railroad and its predecessors, and there's actually a link to that on the History Center's website. You can learn about that there, and anything at the History Center. We're going to have some limited hours going forward. If you want to come visit us, there's all that information on the site.
All of the links are provided in the description below. Thank you, Rudy, for the interview, as well as everyone at Port Jervis for the lovely experience. After the wonderful time we had at Port Jervis, it was time to make our way back into New York City. We admired our view along the trip. Except I fell asleep for like 2 hours, so I missed out on some stuff. But I did wake up as we were getting close to the city. When we were going to Port Jervis, we transferred at Secaucus Junction. But this time, we wanted to spice up the adventure some more. So we stayed on the train until arriving at the last stop, Hoboken Terminal. Disembarking the train, we made our way inside the building to have a look around. As we entered, we quickly spotted one of the rail fans' favorite hobbies, looking at model trains.
But that's so weird. They took out the center track of the O scale and then slapped the HO in there. Why?
Moving from the models, we toured the building as well as the facilities outside. Much like Port Jervis, the terminal has seen changes over time since this building's completion in 1907, after the original building was destroyed in a fire 2 years prior. Trains used to come from as far as Chicago to this station, and passengers can then take a ferry into New York City. Today, the Hoboken terminal hosts passenger trains for New Jersey Transit as well as a slice for Metro North. It also provides other transit services, including the Hudson Virgin Light Rail, though we didn't have time to ride it on this trip. Instead, we head for a different train to take us to Penn Station, Path. Before doing so, Jared needed to make a stop to replenish his energy, and there's only one place anyone from Massachusetts could do that.
Doesn't even look like coffee.
I don't think she knew what that meant. So she's just like 80%
20% right.
He ordered a coffee and all he got is creamer.
100% cream. Oh.
Making our way to get on board the train to Manhattan, I was dealing with the same issue of getting onto the platform as I did at Secaucus. But finally, I was able to make it inside as our train had arrived. In Penn Station, we made the decision of getting dinner in Queens, only because we needed a reason to ride on America's most popular commuter rail, the Long Island Railroad. As we made our way down the concourse and over to our train, I noticed something very strange at the platform.
Are we sure this is the Long Island Railroad? Or is this the MBTA? Since when does the T operate at Penn Station?
Why is the T here?
As far as I'm aware, the MBTA doesn't have any trains running to New York, let alone Penn Station. Or maybe this could be hinting at a future service to New York. Who knows? After all, one of the stations on the Long Island Railroad is Forest Hills. Coincidence? I think not. Before anyone says something in the comments, yes, I know Forest Hills is a part of Queens. Anyway, we are off track here. Not literally though. Before getting dinner, we rode as far as our wallets would allow us, to Mineola. Though we didn't do much at the station, we did experiment with the elevators to see if it was faster than to take the stairs. But that was more of an excuse for Antanas and myself to take it rather than walking. Unlike Jared, who is always #team stairs.
So that's about 24 seconds for you to get up here.
I feel so much fitter.
You lost like 2 calories from that.
2 calories by going up.
After some time, we headed back towards Queens on one of the squeakiest trains I have ever been on. Eventually, we disembarked in Jamaica to get some food and blow some steam before we made our way to Penn Station.
Jared and I are going to be heading back to Manhattan to sleep. Antanas is going to stay here because reasons.
Because I live here.
Oh yeah, I guess that's a good reason. It's past midnight and Moynihan Hall is just completely empty.
Yeah, take a look at it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love it. So, it's the end of day 2. Got into a room that is wicked humid, but I'm gonna get some shut-eye. We're gonna visit West Side Yard tomorrow, and then we're gonna take Northeast Regional back to Boston, so good night.
It was finally the last day of the journey. With only a few hours to spare before our return trip to Boston, the adventure team thought it would be great to visit 2 areas. The first of which was the High Line, a once elevated railway turned into a greenway. The High Line was once called the West Side Elevated Line, which opened in 1934 as a freight rail corridor owned by the New York Central. It was a replacement for trains running through the streets of the city, as street-running trains were a danger for civilians. As truck shipping became more popular, the elevated railway was slowly neglected until it was abandoned in 1980. The degrading infrastructure was given the order to be torn down in the late 90s, but only to be saved by a non-profit organization as they discovered the old railway had sparked life for various plants and vegetation. The organization, Friends of the High Line, redeveloped the relic into a new public space with various amenities. But one thing that's fascinating about the High Line is giving it a new purpose. Similarly, the Port Jervis Transportation History Center has taken an almost forgotten rail yard into a community hub utilizing pieces of history, while the High Line takes almost a similar approach. It seems more fitting to preserve a piece of history one way or another, rather than completely dismantling it and only be recorded through books or Wikipedia pages. Exploring the High Line could probably be a good half-day of adventure, but we needed to make our second destination. So we headed towards the subway via an incline elevator, something you don't usually see in a subway station.
So we're on the Sunford right now for 2 reasons. First of all, we're gonna go to Grand Central, but second, we're gonna go past Times Square, and Times Square has the longest announcement as far as New York City goes. So we're gonna experience that first here on Max Transit.
Yes, one of the things I could ever ask for is to listen to the longest announcement on board a train. I was able to get a recording of it through my device, but from a busted speaker. So here is the 7 train Times Square announcement for all the rail fans.
Times Square, 42nd Street. Transfer is available to the 1, 2, 3, A, C, E, N, Q, and R trains. Transfer is available to the shuttle to Grand Central. Connection is available to the Port Authority bus terminal.
This is an accessible station. The elevator is at the center of the platform.
Marvelous. A couple of stops later, and we arrive at the Grand Central stop, where we would make an undebatable decision.
Jared was the stairs, so I guess we take the stairs.
Okay. Hi, Jared.
As the High Line was once part of the New York Central, so was Grand Central Terminal. The original terminal, which was called Grand Central Depot, was built in 1871, only lasting about 40 years as the station couldn't handle the increase in passenger service. In 1913, the present-day building was constructed with the old station demolished. The terminal had peaked in 1947 by transporting 65 million passengers, but afterwards began its decline with the rail industry. When the New York Central and Pennsylvania Railroad merged to become Penn Central, the new company wanted to demolish the station and build a skyscraper in its place. However, thanks to the unfortunate destruction of the original Penn Station, the city designated the terminal as a landmark in order to preserve the building and rejected the railroad's proposed skyscraper. Today, Grand Central consists of over 50 tracks to facilitate Metro North trains with another 8 tracks dedicated for the Long Island Railroad. If you ever do find yourself visiting the station, one should stop by the Whispering Arcs, where 2 people standing at opposite corners can hear each other through the walls, as demonstrated here.
No smoking, please.
Okay, it's barely audible, but it's better to have the real experience. Inside the building, we wanted to visit the souvenir shop, only to find it closed. But I took the bad news as a champ.
No! I only
only came here for this reason. I can be a little dramatic sometimes. Sadly for me and Jared, we had a train to catch for Boston, so we made our way onto the subway and headed on over to Penn Station, grabbing some lunch before departure.
I'm just here to trigger the internet with pineapple on pizza.
Finally, after having our pizzas, we headed towards our train, bidding farewell to Antanas.
All right, let's go. Bye-bye.
And made our way home. Personally, this is one of the best trips I've had in my life. Since this was done in May of 2022, this was a point where the world had really got out of the coronavirus pandemic and everyone could return to doing things like traveling. It was fun to hang out with people who I already knew while also meeting new faces. Lots of history was found in our travel, and some of that history has been revitalized or continued to thrive in our society today. Again, I want to thank Rudy and the team at the Port Jervis Transportation History Center for the wonderful time they gave to me and my friends, and I hope you, the viewer, will get the chance to head out there to experience it yourself. Sadly, every journey must come to an end, no matter how long or short they may be, whether it's by the length of time or the distance one travels. This adventure took place in the course of 3 days, but with all the transit we had used, there were hundreds of miles of traveling. As a transit nerd, this is the type of journey I seek out and would travel hundreds more miles if I could. I look forward to the next journey and to sharing future adventures with all of you. It's time to wrap this up, but before we go to our next stop, I want to share one more thing. Train!
Right, we are back at South Station where it all began. Overall, had a wonderful weekend in New York. You know, kind of unusual for a Bostonian to go out there.
Yeah,
but
I was a little squirrely to be running this weekend. I realized that, but
especially,
all right, we lived.
Yeah, overall, great weekend. Good to go to Port Jervis for the first time and have a very nice commute. But yeah, other than that, next stop,